Stranded on the Antarctic ice, their ship sunk. How did Ernest Shackleton's crew survive for 2 years before being rescued? Our science correspondent, Martin Stew, is on his way to the scene of that mission impossible more than 100 years ago. And from penguins to chimpanzees, conservationist Jane Goodall tells us why what happens in Antarctica impacts all of us. I'm Lucy Watson, and this is what you need to know. Right then, Martin, this is our third and final chat, I'm sorry to say. I've so enjoyed talking to you from right there, although today feels a bit strange because I'm in a summer dress in one of the hottest days of the year, experiencing that, and I'm seeing all that snow behind you. Feels very, very weird. How are you feeling anyway?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Lucy. Looking forward to coming home and seeing the family shortly, but it's been a great trip and quite surreal now. As we edge closer to the shortest day, polar winter, the ice is kind of thickening around us. So the night before last, I was up on the bridge watching us carving and cutting and smashing through some of the sea ice. And then you get into the bunk, and Mike, the cameraman's bunk particularly, is the one right at the front, or right at the bow of the ship, I should say. And so you hear the clunk of the blocks of ice as we go through. So it's all feeling very Antarctic and very real.
I was watching that in your latest report from there. How does it do that? How does it carve through? Is there a special shape to that ship that enables it to carve through it? Because it is so thick. It was really amazing when I watched it, and a bit scary.
Yeah, so you've got, there's lots of different sorts of ice, but you have sea ice, which is where the sea water itself melts, and that's relatively new ice. It's not that thick, and it's quite soft because it's saltwater ice. And that's what the ship is designed to break. So the underside, rather than being a kind of a deep V, is like the underside slightly curved of a spoon. And so what happens is the ship almost rides up on top of the ice, and then the weight of the ship smashes and cuts through that ice. What it can't do that to is the bits of fresh ice which have fallen off the glacier. And that is what the things like icebergs or bergy bits, the smaller icebergs, or growlers, and then the smaller bits, and then brash. There's so many different names. And so what the pilots are trying to do is steer in between the big lumps. You're fine on the small stuff, but every now and then a big lump might be lurking under the thinner stuff, and that's when you get the kind of the clunks. So it's a real sort of, there's always two people at least watching, one sweeping the floodlights at all times, because in the wind, icebergs can move in from the side as well, so you'll be looking in every direction. And then you know that it's going to be a bit hairy when the ship slows down, because the slower you go, the less impact if you catch one of these bergy bits.
Have you been nervous? Have you been scared at any point with regards to that side of the operation?
I don't think so. No, I mean, the crew are really professional. It's what they do. It's what this ship is designed for. There's a few moments when you're lying in the bunk and you think, that's that is a loud one. We're quite sure what's going on. But no, I haven't been scared. It's quite exciting, really. You know, when you trust someone, it's just an adventure, like going on a roller coaster, I guess.
Talking of adventures, you are on your way to a very special place, really rather significant. I'm going to start calling you Ernie. Tell me, you're on your way to Elephant Island. Why is that significant? Why is that such a big deal?
It's significant for those who like their polar history because it is where Ernest Shackleton's men ended up. And for those who don't know the story of Ernest Shackleton, he was a sort of a great adventurer and explorer, and he took a ship called the Endurance down to Antarctica, and they went into the Weddell Sea, which is slightly east of here, and it got stuck in the pack ice, the sort of sea ice, that then moved the ship further and further from land and gradually crushed the wooden hull of the Endurance. The men all had to decamp, get off onto the ice, and they then made their way when they could to Elephant Island, which we're on our way to. The men stayed there, and the only way they could get a rescue is Shackleton and a few of the other men took the lifeboats with no real navigation equipment, hardly anything, and managed to sail 720 miles to South Georgia Island. They landed on the wrong side of a giant mountain. They had to then climb up. It's completely absurd, because if they'd missed that island, which isn't that big by a small matter, it's thousands of miles to the next bit of land. Anyway, they then got a lift over to Chile, where they then rallied a team, came back and rescued the men, and they all survived. Basically, nearly 2 years in total they were on the ice, eating seals and penguins and whatever they could lay their hands on. But it's just the most remarkable story of endurance, quite literally, the ship and the human spirit. It's worth pointing out the reason we're going there it isn't just for an adventurous jolly. They're doing science at a glacier right next to it as well. But it's also a kind of a really amazing thing in talking to Captain Will Whatley, who remarkably only turned 36 while on this trip, but he is so calm and so experienced. He started when he was 19 working at British Antarctic Survey, and it was then that the ship, the precursor to this one, was called the Ernest Shackleton, and he thought, I should probably read up on him. And here's what he had to say about what it's like to be captaining this historic mission.
I love reading about history in the polar regions whilst in the polar regions, but this trip is really extra special. The last British research ship to spend Midwinter's Day in Antarctica was Endurance, and now here we are, and we'll be at Elephant Island on Midwinter's Day.
I mean, it's such a wonderful story. Even in that clip, you can see him beaming. He is really excited. I'm guessing you and Mike are too.
We are, yeah. I mean, it's just everything here is exciting. I would say that, you know, Will is a remarkable person, but he loves sailing. You know, in his time off in between these things, he sails his own little yacht across to New York and back just because he likes sailing. He's really into it. So it is great, and it's lovely to see everyone so enthusiastic. And you when you are this far away from friends and family, getting that team spirit and that bond and doing amazing things is kind of what binds people together, I guess. Not that dissimilar to what bound Shackleton's meant together, although for them it was a survival as much as anything else.
A little bit more arduous, I think, Martin.
Just a little. Yeah, I've 3 meals a day in the galley is easy street for me.
And a bed. Last time we chatted, we talked about the impact global warming was having on the penguin population. But now you've been looking at, in one of your most recent reports, into the wildlife that lies beneath, that's under the water. Just tell me what you've been finding out this week.
Yeah, well, my assumption was, I don't know what you think, that the seabed would be quite dull and maybe some strange-looking creatures of the deep and not a huge amount else. It turns out on the seabed is about 90% of the marine life in the Southern Ocean. And there's about 20,000 species, they reckon, of which less than half have even been given a name. We just don't know very much about them at all. They are quite weird and wonderful. They can survive in temperatures. The sea can get below 0 degrees because it's salt water. The freezing level is slightly lower. So they're living basically in sub-zero temperatures. They grow very slowly because it's so cold. You've got these weird sea spiders. Some of them can be sort of 2 foot in diameter. Lots of starfish, actually, which are surprisingly colourful, and urchins. And all these different things. And we should care about them for several reasons. I posed this to marine biologists because they do look a bit weird. I said, obviously everyone cares about emperor penguins. They look cute. And his point was, well, every life is valuable. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, these creatures hold some amazing biology within them that could really help human race. So, for example, there is a chemical or something that they've managed to extract or understand from these sorts of creatures, which is used in your ice cream at home to keep it soft and not crystallize when it comes in and out of the freezer. There could be a chance that there are enzymes that mean you can put your washing powder on and wash at 20 degrees instead of 40 degrees and save lots of energy. There are kind of industrial lubricants, all these things that we could learn about, but we don't even know the names of half these species at the moment. So they go and collect some of these species. To get that is no small challenge either. They dive for them, sometimes have to get a chainsaw, cut through the ice, dip underwater and go and get these things. But in the aquarium, you could see some of these species, and they're worried about 2 different things, actually. One is the warming of the ocean itself, and the other is the impact of icebergs. So the warming of the ocean, to simulate what they think might happen projected over the next 100 years or so, they put sort of small heat pads on the bottom of the ocean, which warm the water by 1 degree and 2 degrees. And what they've been finding over a series of years is that in the short term, the creatures grow much faster because there's more warmth, there's more energy. But then in the long term, even with just a couple of degrees warming, they all start to die. And then the other thing is to do with icebergs. So as ice calves off glaciers and creates icebergs that fall into the sea, that's a natural process, happened for millions of years. The icebergs are quite heavy, they sink down to the bottom, scrape across and then pop back up again. And that scouring, it's called, but they kind of mash up a whole seabed, kills most of the stuff underneath. It's a bit like the underwater version of a wildfire. So in some respects, it's quite good. It freshens up the life. Life then comes back and it cleans up the ecosystem. What they're worried about now, as it appears we're seeing more of the calving, is that if the frequency of that scouring from the icebergs increases, the life hasn't got time to bounce back and grow again in between each of those scouring events. So that's another thing they'd be looking at. If you remember at primary school, you have those kind of biology squares you'd put down in the field and you'd count how many ants and four-leaf clovers you could find. They're sort of doing something similar, but with much bigger squares on the bottom of the ocean to try and understand the impact of the icebergs.
Now, climate change and the impacts of climate change go far beyond where you are right now. And I know, hot off the press, that you've just got off not quite the telephone, but probably Zoom with Jane Goodall, who we know as the chimpanzee lady, basically, but also her institute, the Jane Goodall Institute, and I think she has a movement called Roots and Shoots program. They all work on conservation. Has she been watching you, number one, but also what does she have to say to you, Martin?
I didn't ask her if she'd been watching me. I thought that was slightly...
You missed your chance.
Yeah, I know. But she was lovely and amazing. She's 91 now, still sharp as a tack. And one of the questions I asked her actually was, when we talked before about the emperor penguins, they're a bit like a panda, aren't they? Everyone gets it. We care about penguins. They don't care about the creatures, the weird sea spiders on the bottom of the ocean floor. And I said, is it a distraction to care about the penguins? She said, no, actually, it's really important for the human psyche that we buy in and care about something. It doesn't matter what that thing is, but once you care about a part of the environment, everything is interconnected so you can see the bigger picture. And I also asked her, in her decades of doing this now, what her reflections on the human race are. Are we a force for good or a force for bad? And she said, we're this kind of strange split species, one part capable of real evil and terrible things, the other capable of great compassion and doing real good, and then a few people sort of stuck in the middle. And she said it's up to us to make the right choices. And the final thought of the interview, actually, I'll let her say it in her words because it's really stuck with me. Here's how she signed off.
Well, I think one of the most important messages is for everybody to understand every single day you live on this planet, you make some impact, and you can choose what sort of impact you make.
I mean, she's a remarkable woman, and the work that she does. So you are, as we said at the very beginning, you are en route home after your experience. You did leave a few people behind though, didn't you?
They have to keep the station running throughout the year, to keep the generators turning, all that sort of stuff. And so I think there's just over 40 left on the station. And it's really nice that as the ship sets off, they all come down to the wharf. And then as we pull away and the horn sounds, they light up a flare, these kind of red flares, and they stand there waving goodbye, saying like, farewell, see you. And they are now completely alone for the next 3 or 4 months. No real chance of people coming in and seeing them, no restocking of food supplies, anything along those lines. So that is what's happening at the moment for them. And it was a really emotional moment because some of the people who have been on the station are coming home on the ship with us as well at the moment. And so they're saying goodbye to people they've lived with for 6 months. They've become sort of great friends, really, their family in many senses. And I was asking the people just before we left how they feel about it, because obviously they're heading into the colder months, the darker months, with a much smaller team. And there's some nervousness, but there's also some real excitement because this is the adventure, isn't it? This is it. This is as remote and wild as you can get. But there they are now. They've got lots of jobs to do, stuff to get sorted. So when the larger science teams who come back in the summer, when it's easier to do a lot of the scientific work, when they all come back, the base will be, and the station rather, will be fully running, good to go, and all the scientists can hit the ground running.
And they've got the most incredible name, haven't they? They're called the Winterers or something like that. Sounds like it's from a novel or a storybook to me.
It's got a definite whiff of Game of Thrones. And when you look at the sort of glacier ice cliffs that surround Rothera Station, it does have a look of the White Wall as well. So it's quite apt.
So you're on your way home, as I've said, and whenever I have been on a trip or been to some far-flung place, and I don't want it to sound trite, but it might come out like that I always feel like I come back a better person in some way, whether I've experienced something that's I don't know, made me more compassionate, or I'm more educated, or I've seen something that I've never seen before. All those kind of things. I feel like a little bit an improved person. What are your kind of reflections, your takeaways, I suppose, from this, Martin? How has it enriched you, do you think?
I think you can see sort of the connection of the whole world. You realise, because this place is so enormous, it's so wild, it's so pretty when the sun sets and sun rises, and it's absolutely vast. And you realise that actually, yes, it's 9,000 miles from home, but it is so connected to everything at home. It's the air conditioning system of the world. It holds all the fresh water that can see sea level rises, all these things. And you realise the world is a much smaller place, and that humans, we are tiny. We're inconsequential in the sense of the scale of Antarctica, and yet we are consequential in the future of Antarctica, because it's what people are doing which is changing this continent. So that's what I take away. And I'd also take away the sacrifices people make to be able to do the science down here. Yes, there's an element of adventure and fun, and it's something completely crazy and new. But also it's really difficult. It's hardship. It's expensive to get people down here. It's costly in terms of money and carbon to do science. But there's a value to things that people do. And lots of the people who are down here could be doubling their money working for a mining company, but they don't. Even if you're a chef, you're an engineer, you're a truck driver, you're all doing it for the same purpose. There's a common goal to try and build a scientific understanding to help the world learn and potentially change its actions before it's too late.
Martin, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed chatting to you on this ship and on your voyage. In fact, today, for the first time, I've noticed I started to move my chair around in the studio, and that's because I realised that it wasn't me moving. It's you I can see behind.
Yeah, we're swaying a bit. Yeah.
You're swaying. And that's the first time I've noticed today, but it actually made me physically move my chair. Anyway, have very, very safe travels back to us, both you and Mike. And it has been wonderful seeing your stuff and to chat to you each week of the travels. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
And for all Martin's reports from Antarctica, head to itv.com/news. Remember to subscribe to What You Need to Know wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And you can watch full shows on ITVX, Spotify and YouTube. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us.